Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy. Satellite imagery for today. Again, a real lack of storminess here over the Gulf of Alaska. Disturbance here actually formed right in there earlier today near the Queen Charlotte's, pulling off to the southwest. Another system down there off the Washington coast. Otherwise, clear skies across the southeast here with still windy, but not nearly as windy as it was over the weekend. Light winds along the North Gulf Coast and fair conditions. Dry Copper River Basin, actually dry over all of the interior. Had some clouds right in here, high clouds you can see kind of pivoting around that upper level ridge over the area, and then northwest flow onto the Arctic coast there, bringing some clouds up into that area. Out to the west, lack of storminess out here as well. Pretty good conditions with actually some clearing here for the Alaska Peninsula right on up toward the Bering Strait. Some clouds though around St. Lawrence Island, and thicker deck here through the central Bering Sea, making its way into the Pribilof Islands, and that extended down into the eastern Aleutians there. They had a few showers around Unalaska early this morning, pretty scattered and quite light. And then this weakening frontal boundary out here pushing westward. And you can see easterly flow increasing here across the Aleutians, shoving that thing back to the west. And so most of the rain, what there was associated with it, now has pretty much exited the AKwx area. On the chart today, drew that in right about there, a warm front now since it's actually being pushed back to the west with warmer air coming up from the southeast. Again, lack of gradient, lack of winds over the Aleutians, eastern Aleutians here. Well, actually all of the Aleutians, pretty good lack of wind today, as well as the Bering Sea, Bristol Bay. Just a lot of high pressure here from northwest Canada. Eastward with that center 1,027 millibars, down considerably from what it was late last week. Thursday is something like 1,053. Continuing to weaken, and actually high pressure starting to develop out here over the central Bering Sea. Up to the north, this system sliding southeastward there, grazing the eastern Arctic coast with I guess they had up to 40 to 50 mile per hour winds out of the west today. Kaktovik, Barter Island, so that would have given some blowing snow. But winds much lighter just back to the west there, with just areas of fog and flurries extending back to about Barrow and then clearing out here on the west side. Definitely good VFR there with mostly high clouds through this area. And then down to the south, snow today across the Queen Charlotte Islands, but that's all heading southwestward. And no threat. Clouds early in Dixon entrance into the extreme southern panhandle, but that was about it. And it's back to the clear skies, which will last through tonight. It'll stay breezy, but winds gradually coming down here for the southeast coast, but not ending altogether. And staying light wind-wise here, North Gulf Coast, Gulf of Alaska, even the offshore areas looking pretty light wind-wise, as well as south central Alaska. Could be some areas of patchy low clouds and fog from Knik Arm there, all down into Cook Inlet forming tonight due to the light wind conditions and the inversion. High pressure holding over the interior, slowly weakening, but at least holding through tonight. And that That front should take most of the moisture east of even the extreme eastern areas there into Canada tonight, so really not much of a factor. While up to the north, another front pushing eastward. Actually, the remnants of that one that's out there now starts moving eastward a little bit there, and that might spread a chance of some light snow into St. Lawrence Island. Mostly Gamble has a better chance than Savunga, and some of that also might slip on into the Bering Strait. Otherwise, it'll stay west of Point Hope and Cape Lisburne. So mostly clear here with light winds all in the west out into the Bering Sea. Look for clouds to increase, maybe some light showers developing there south end of Shelikof Strait and along the Pacific side of the central Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, that's about it. Not a lot of changes. Easterly winds 15 to maybe 25 miles per hour. Lightest here over the Fox Islands, and light also for the Pribilofs, and throw a few showers in with mostly cloudy skies. And that's about the extent of any weather for tonight. And then for tomorrow, that front weakens into a trough, but comes far enough east, will bring a chance of moisture into the western Seward Peninsula, across St. Lawrence Island, northward there to Kivlina and the west side of the Arctic coast to possibly as far east as Wainwright. Southwest winds increasing 15 to maybe 25 miles per hour there on the western Arctic coast, lighter from the central coast eastward, with more clearing and probably VFR conditions there. And another day here of light winds and mostly clear skies. Definitely VFR flying through all of the interior tomorrow. Again, patchy areas of low clouds and fog developing in some areas like, again, Knik Arm, Cook Inlet possibly, maybe some other locations, but nothing really all that widespread. And even lighter winds in store here for the southeast coast for Tuesday. Staying maybe a little breezy, especially early on over the southern panhandle, but conditions definitely trending downward or continuing that. Maybe some clouds here, Kodiak Island, and again, possible light precipitation here from roughly about False Pass eastward along the Aleutians. Easterly winds continue, gradually increasing, keep at 15 to 25 miles per hour tomorrow. Lightest here again for the Fox Islands. Light winds for the Pribilofs, and for Wednesday, we'll see this front, actually another front, drops eastward and southward here into the Arctic, and that is going to start to trend toward colder temperatures following in behind. And there'll be a narrow band of light snow here with that front. Nothing really heavy, except possibly it'll be a little heavier where it enhances on the upslope areas of the Alaska Range, and then trailing back out to St. Lawrence Island, areas of fog and flurries with that as the winds swing around to the north and northeast behind it. And also along the Brooks Range here, areas of snow, mainly central eastern areas. More wind, northwest winds, so look for some possible blowing snow to develop again on the eastern Arctic coast. Better conditions back to the west, and actually that trough coming in from the northwest, that's the leading edge of the true Arctic air that's going to be plunging into the interior and then down the west side, but actually will be affecting all of interior Alaska, including the Panhandle and the Aleutians, especially the northern Bering Sea. Much colder air flow into there over the next few days. And for the temperatures today, up in the interior, Fairbanks -13, Tanana cooler again with 21 below zero. That same temperature matched over at Tok, while Delta was -4. -4 Gulkana, McCarthy at 9 below. 19 above at Gunsight, Palmer 12. Kenai checked in with 10 degrees above zero, while Homer was right at the freeze mark. 28 in Seward, 34 at Valdez. Cordova is 26, and 26 also there at Yakutat. Southeast coast, again, mid-20s to upper 30s, 37 at Sitka. Otherwise, Wrangell had 25, 34 both at Klawock and Annette, with 38. Up to the north, 15 below at Fort Yukon, -19 there at Bettles, and then 3 above at Anatuvik, -2 for Umiat Airfield. Otherwise, temperatures actually down from yesterday, where they were in the 20s. Today, just single numbers and teens, with 10 degrees over at Dead Horse, up to 31 there at Cape Lisburne. Otherwise, 1 Kotzebue, -4 at Selawik, 7 Shishmaref. Single numbers there for Golovin and Nome with 3 and 5. But Koyuk up to 12, minus 15 at Caltag, 22 Unalakleet, minus 16 over at McGrath, and then rising above 0 down toward Bethel with 5, 18 for Macoriac, and near 30 for St. Lawrence Island. Upper 30s this afternoon. The Pribilofs, that same temperature pattern here for the peninsula. And all of the Aleutians, mid to upper 30s there. Kodiak 36, 11 degrees at King Salmon. Lows for tonight dropping down probably towards 0 in some areas of northeast Bristol Bay. Well below 0 again over the interior, especially north of the Alaska Range. Areas of the Copper River Basin dropping into the mid-minus 20s possibly, and then staying above 0 for the most of the north slope in the Arctic coast, as well as the Seward Peninsula, with single numbers for the deltas, and then cooling back. That's McGrath, should be down to 20, 25 below both McGrath and Nikolai. Otherwise 30s above freezing for the Aleutians, 24 for the Pribilofs, and 10 to 20 for the southeast coast. Coastal areas a little milder. And for the highs tomorrow, back into the mid-20s to mid-30s here for the Panhandle. Upper 20s North Gulf Coast. Teens, South Central Alaska. Below 0 there for the Tanana, Upper Yukon valleys westward to about the Kobuk Valley and the northern Kuskokwim Valley areas, and then warming up to the upper 20s out toward the coast. A shade above freezing for St. Lawrence Island, and still mild up there along the Arctic coast with 30s for the Aleutians and Bering Sea. Tomorrow's flying weather looks like IFR here just west of Nunivak Island, up across St. Lawrence Island through the strait, and staying mostly west of the coast there with some patchy marginal stuff here on the east side. Pretty good conditions down in the Gulf of Alaska and Panhandle, but area marginal VFR on the increase now over the Gulf, down near Kodiak Island, south side of the Alaska Peninsula, and just areas of marginal VFR, but tending to increase here for the Aleutians. For tomorrow afternoon, this area expands, moves eastward. Now we've got IFR in the forecast from the Bering Strait coming in toward western Norton Sound, Nunivak Island, expanding down here, but staying north of the peninsula and the eastern Aleutians. Marginal VFR everywhere else, marginal conditions along the Arctic coast, and again, this stuff starting to creep up toward the coastline there a little bit, but it'll stay well west of the Panhandle. And for Anaktuvik, passes open, VFR for Anaktuvik and Adigan, and Lake Clark and Merrill, Celine's visibilities well above the VFR threshold. Same forecast for rainy, windy. Another VFR day is for Isabel and Mentasta. Tanita VFR, Portage, same forecast, no change for Chilkoot and White. Freezing levels late tonight, early tomorrow morning, 6,000 feet here right over the central interior areas up to just about the Brooks Range there. 2,000 feet near the border, 4,000 feet out here to the west, 2,000 near the Pribilofs. And icing wise, none to speak of. Really no significant icing at all, if even that, through tomorrow. So moving on to the winds aloft, actually a 30,000 foot wind flow chart showing that high pressure actually starting to the center slipping down to the south, but through tomorrow we'll still have the jet arcing far to the north, cutting across the western Arctic coast, and then southward there well into Canada. With this other high out here developing, we're going to see this disturbance here is going to track southeastward, flatten that jet southward, and is actually going to dig into southwest Alaska late in the week, and by the weekend, that'll bring a major change in across just about all of Alaska. 9,000 feet for tomorrow, westerly flow, 10 to 25 knots, Norton Sound, or I'm sorry, Seward Peninsula, out across the strait, 10 to 20 here over the northeast interior, up to 30 knots there in eastern Arctic coast, swinging around northwest, pretty light here, 5 to 10 knots for the Panhandle. Light winds for the North Gulf Coast and Kodiak Island, light winds all through southern Alaska, the Bering Sea, and then you pick up about 15 here for the Unalaska area, and then that picks up to about 30 knots. Strongest winds though south of the chain, a tad lighter to the north. 3,000 feet, same pattern here, pretty much easterly, 15 to 20 for the eastern Aleutians, up to 25 for the central and western areas. High pressure, keeps the winds light. Kodiak Island up to the Kenai Peninsula, light westerly flow, southern Alaska and the Panhandle, but more northerly. Winds increasing here from the west, 20 to 25 knots for the central and western Arctic coast, locally down into the Chukchi Sea. Taking a look at turbulence, pretty smooth tomorrow everywhere with a lack of wind. Maybe light to isolated, very isolated turbulence there for the western central Arctic coast, and possibly out here over the far western Aleutians, all below about 4,000 feet. Well, after hangar flying, I'll be back with a look at the ice edge and the marine forecasts.
Good evening, I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to Hangar Flying. Our guest, Walter Combs, has been on our program before. Walter's been involved with one of the most dramatic improvements in the flying scene in Alaska since GPS, and that is the weather cams. Walter was on our program earlier this year, but a lot of new features have been added and capabilities improved. First, about Walter. He's been in Alaska 30 years, with the FAA since 1996. He previously worked on Capstone and has been the program manager of weather cams since 2011. Welcome back, Walter.
Thank you.
So recently you made some presentations about weather cams to a group in DC and the industry council here in Anchorage, and that presentation I saw. Who was the group in DC and why did you do it?
It was the program management office, my line of business, and I was invited down to be kind of the draw, the attraction for a Thanksgiving or just prior to Thanksgiving for an all hands meeting that they were having, and so I was able to. They asked me down to present the weather camera program to the team. A lot of people didn't know about the program or didn't know much about it.
So talk a little bit about the presentation itself.
Well, the presentation, when I first started, I realized that a lot of folks, understanding that they didn't know a lot about the program. I basically just described to them how we got started, what the purpose of the cameras were, and how the camera system is developed to operate. And then I just walked them through a scenario. Actually, the scenario was Thanksgiving at Grandma's, where a pilot would do his pre-flight planning using weather cameras from Anchorage to Cordova, as a for instance, and how he would use flight services and the METARs and TAFs and the other weather products that are available to make his flight decision with cameras, and then a stark contrast prior to cameras.
So I guess when I think about it, this is something that all of us pilots are very familiar with and understand very well what a great tool it is, but people outside the state probably need to be told.
Yes, I think that's true. Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to do right now. Is I think this year I'm going to try to, or my work is to try to broaden the knowledge of the weather camera program and what it actually brings to aviation, and what it brings to flight decisions. In addition to the flight services that are available, in addition to all the weather products, radar, satellite, and all those pieces, cameras bring a whole new dimension. So when you add, I like to say, when you add METARs and TAFs to weather cameras, you get the whole picture.
Oh, absolutely. So in a way, almost a marketing plan, huh?
But yeah, I think it is a marketing plan. We need to educate people about what the cameras are. They're very, for the most part, they're inexpensive, and when they're networked together, they do just that. They give a lot clearer picture, and pilots are able to make better decisions, we've learned, with the cameras. And I'd like to kind of expand that, broaden that knowledge.
As I remember, or as I understand, in 2007, there were 80 camera sites.
That's correct.
How many now?
We have 230 FAA-owned camera sites, so that means FAA owns and maintains those sites. It's about 960 cameras that we have across the state of Alaska. And we also have third-party cameras. These are cameras that are owned by other entities that we add to our network of cameras to what we fill gaps, is what we call it. And so to include, NAV Canada has about 160 camera sites, I believe, maybe a few more than that. But they have about 160 camera sites, and we've added those to our website to provide that camera service between Alaska and the lower 48 states to pilots who fly back and forth.
What a great tool that is, those Canadian sites. Wow, it just keeps getting better and better. You mentioned when we were talking that you've been working closely with flight standards. Talk about that coordination.
Well, flight standards here in Alaska and at headquarters too they benefit from the cameras in several ways. How do I say this? They use the cameras themselves, but they see how the pilots and the flying industry actually use these cameras. And so recently, down in Misty Fjords area, last year there was a crash where there was 9 fatalities. You remember that? And flight standards started asking around down in that area, and the pilots were telling them, we have a couple of areas where it's real dark. In other words, there's no weather information whatsoever in these 2 critical locations that we need on a northern route and a southern route that they fly over to Misty Fjords or over to Rudyard Bay from Ketchikan. And there's a
I'm
lot
going to
of
have to cut you off here, Walter.
Okay.
Wait, let's do this.
Okay.
I'll get you on next time.
Okay.
We'll talk about Misty Fjords, wrap that up.
Okay.
And then I want to talk about some of the new things you've got planned.
Okay.
Thanks for being on the program.
You bet. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. Until next time, fly safe.
Welcome back. Well, ice continuing to slowly increase throughout the weekend of today. Bristol Bay up along the southwest coast now, getting a little heavier concentration than what was analyzed yesterday. Norton Sound still pretty ice-free here, St. Lawrence Island up to the Strait, but by late Wednesday, the bona fide Arctic air will start seeping in south of the Strait here and in across the northern Bering Sea, and then just winds will become stronger, and even colder air will continue for the next 5 days or longer beyond that. And that's when the sea ice should significantly increase rapidly here, St. Lawrence Island northward. Marine forecasts, light winds again along the Panhandle, northwest 10, otherwise northerlies 15, seas 5 to 6 feet. North 15, Clarence Strait, 20 knotters for Stevens Passage and Northern Lynn Canal. And then those come down to 10 knots here for Lynn Canal on Wednesday. And actually may just become light and variable in that area with light winds predominantly from the north here through the central and southern inside channels. And north 15 on the south coast, northwest, and then light westerlies up to the north. And they'll see staying pretty low, just 4 to 5 feet. And for Prince William Sound tomorrow, variable to north winds on the light side. Light winds for Cook Inlet. Light winds here for the North Gulf Coast, but west increasing to 25 knots there for the Barren Islands. And then back down to 15 knots for Kamishak Bay. Easterly winds here, westerly winds on the east side of Kodiak Island, 20 knots. Then for Wednesday, small craft advisories in that area with seas building to 7 feet. 25 to 30 knot winds now. Kamishak Bay across the Barren Islands with seas building a little bit there, but winds stay light for the North Gulf Coast, light for Prince William Sound, starting an increase for Cook Inlet, 15 to 20 knots from the north and northeast. Bristol Bay tomorrow, east winds at 10 knots, turn a little more northeasterly down the peninsula, and then southwest at about 15 from Castle Cape to Sitkinak. Then the outlook for Wednesday, a little bit of an increase here. Westerlies or west-northwest picking up to 25 or 20 knots from Sitkinak to Chignik with 5-foot seas. Light northeast winds here from Bristol Bay down the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. And for the eastern Aleutians tomorrow, on the light side, looking at 10 knots there for Unalaska Island out of the east, 5 to 6 foot seas. And then 15 to 20 knots there from Nikolsky westward, increasing further here, 20 to 25 for the central Aleutians, and then 20, that extends actually all the way out to the west. And that uniform wind pattern continues, but starts to pick up a little bit for Wednesday out there. All still easterly, but small craft advisories now from the western areas right over to Adak, and then 20 to 25, 15 knots. So another light wind day coming up for Alaska on Wednesday. And for the southwest coast, light and variable, northwest north of Nunivak Island, Otherwise, northeasterlies coming out of Kuskokwim Bay, but again, only 10 knots, 15 knot northeast for the Pribilof, seas 5 feet, light winds for the northern Bering Sea, and light west, barely even a breeze there for the St. Lawrence Island zone. That turns around to the north, picks up to 15 knots, but Wednesday afternoon, those winds will start to get quite gusty through the Bering Strait, and northerlies 15 north of Nunivak Island, northeast up to 20 coming out of Kuskokwim Bay, Pribilof's northeast 15, St. Matthew Island, same forecast. Arctic coast here, southwest 15 for the central and east side, becoming a little more westerly over to demarcation point. Western coast, southwest 20, all the way down to Cape Thompson down to Wales, south 15. And Wednesday outlook, swinging the direction around, north 15 in that zone, but from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, northwest 25. Brisk wind advisories actually extend all along the western side there. 20 knots central coast, brisk wind advisories west 25 there for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And for tonight again, no change over the interior, just some variable clouds, definitely dry. Patchy fog, Cook Inlet, Knik Arm, maybe a few other locations, but good conditions, light winds, North Gulf Coast, fair over the Panhandle. Possibly an increase in the clouds here, a few isolated showers, that's about it. This front edging eastward there, but the moisture having trouble reaching the state, and maybe a few showers out over the Aleutians. Then for tomorrow, some of that moisture does slide eastward, quite light though. Southwest winds will increase a little bit for the western Arctic coast. No change, fair skies, light winds, all of the interior and the Panhandle, and dry Kodiak Island, a few more clouds to the Alaska Peninsula. Then a front drops eastward, southward, winds pick up there in the western Arctic coast, some blowing snow even on the east side. Much colder air following this in behind, just a narrow band of snow associated with that front.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
I like coming down to the stream and working with students like this